There's a kind of magic in watching someone truly at peace with their life. Have you ever noticed it? The way they move a little slower, not from fatigue, but because they're savoring every step. Their smile isn't hurried or polite. It lingers, genuine and warm. People like this make you pause and wonder, what's their secret? How did they learn to live this way? Jack used to be the kind of man who never stopped moving. As an executive in a fast-paced industry, his life was a whirlwind of meetings, deadlines, and red-eye flights. Retirement, he thought, would be his time to finally slow down. But when the day came, he didn't know how to. He'd spent decades living by the clock, and without it, the days stretched endlessly in front of him. Before we continue, friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but for me, it's an extra motivation to keep creating videos. I'd also really appreciate a comment. Thank you for your support, and now, let's continue with the story. One crisp morning in early autumn, Jack decided to walk to the park near his house. It was something he'd never made time for before, but the stillness of his empty home urged him outside. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and fallen leaves, and the sky was a pale blue streaked with gold from the rising sun. At first, his steps felt aimless, his thoughts scattered. But then, he started noticing things. The cheerful chirping of sparrows in the bushes, the crunch of acorns beneath his sneakers, the way sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the path. A neighbor walking her golden retriever waved at him, and Jack found himself waving back. It became a ritual. Each morning, Jack laced up his shoes and headed out, no agenda other than to be present. On those walks, he began to feel a connection, not just to the world around him, but to himself. He'd smile as he passed the elderly man who always sat on the same bench feeding pigeons. He'd stop to admire the dew clinging to spiderwebs, glittering like tiny pearls. And, slowly, the knot of restlessness in his chest began to unwind. One day, as he stood watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jack realized something profound. This quiet rhythm, this simple act of walking, was teaching him how to live again. And then there's Mary. Mary spent most of her life doing what needed to be done. She raised her kids, cared for her aging parents, and worked long hours at a job that paid the bills but didn't inspire her. By the time she retired, she felt like a patchwork quilt, made up of scraps of responsibility and sacrifice, with no room left for herself. It was her neighbor who first suggested she try gardening. "You'll love it," the woman said, handing Mary a small packet of tomato seeds. Mary had her doubts. She'd never been much for getting her hands dirty. But one sunny afternoon, she found herself kneeling in her backyard, the cool, crumbly soil slipping through her fingers. The garden grew slowly at first, just a few plants struggling to find their footing. Mary spent hours kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds, and gently patting the earth around fragile stems. There was a quiet satisfaction in the work, a sense of grounding she hadn't felt in years. As the weeks passed, her garden began to thrive. Bright green leaves unfurled, delicate blossoms appeared, and soon, plump red tomatoes dangled from the vines. Mary would often walk out in the early morning, still in her slippers, to breathe in the earthy scent of damp soil and listen to the hum of bees buzzing among the flowers. One afternoon, she invited her grandchildren over to pick vegetables. Watching them laugh and marvel at the juicy, sun-warmed tomatoes, Mary felt a flicker of something she hadn't realized she'd lost: pride. Not the kind tied to her roles as a mother or an employee, but pride in something she'd done just for herself. Mary once confided, "I didn't think I had much left to grow, but out there, in my little patch of dirt, I found a whole new part of me." Jack and Mary's stories aren't unique, but they hold a powerful truth. Happiness in retirement isn't about chasing big dreams or achieving monumental goals. It's about finding joy in the small, ordinary moments. It's about creating rituals that anchor you to the present and remind you of the beauty in life's simplest pleasures. As you listen to these stories, perhaps you see pieces of yourself in Jack or Mary. Maybe you felt that restlessness, that sense of losing direction. Or maybe you've been so busy taking care of everyone else that you've forgotten how to nurture your own happiness. What if today was the day you started? What if, like Jack, you stepped outside to feel the sun on your face and the ground beneath your feet? Or, like Mary, you picked up a new hobby, not because you have to, but because it brings you joy? As we continue, I'll share more stories and ideas to inspire you. But for now, take a moment to imagine what your life could look like with just one new habit, one small change that could open the door to a richer, more fulfilling retirement. Stay with me, because the next habit might surprise you. It's something that's easy to overlook, but can transform the way you experience this exciting chapter of life. Let's explore it together. Retirement often feels like stepping onto a new path, one that offers freedom but also requires careful navigation. For many, this chapter brings the realization that health, the foundation of everything we do, has been quietly slipping through the cracks during the busier seasons of life. Yet, it's never too late to rebuild that foundation, even with the smallest of steps. Diane had spent years putting herself last. As a mother and a full-time teacher, her days were a blur of early mornings and late nights, packed lunches and parent-teacher conferences. Exercise was always at the bottom of her to-do list, and the idea of self-care felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. But when Diane retired, the quiet of her new routine brought unexpected realizations. She found herself short of breath climbing stairs, her energy waning before lunch, and her body aching in ways she couldn't ignore. There was a moment, sitting at her kitchen table, when she realized she couldn't play tag with her grandson without needing to rest after just a few minutes. She looked at his bright, eager face and thought, "Is this how I want to spend these precious years?" Watching from the sidelines, a week later, Diane decided to try something new. She signed up for a gentle yoga class at her local community center. The first day, she stood awkwardly at the back of the room, the smooth mat under her bare feet unfamiliar and strange. The soft hum of calming music filled the air, and the instructor's soothing voice guided them through poses with names she'd never heard before: Downward Dog, Child's Pose, Warrior. Diane's legs trembled, her balance faltered, and she couldn't help but feel a little ridiculous. But something happened as she kept showing up. Each week, the movements became more familiar, the stretching less uncomfortable. Diane began to notice small changes. A little more strength in her arms, a little less tension in her shoulders. Her sleep improved, her energy returned, and most importantly, she felt proud of herself. One morning, she sat in her car after class, the crisp autumn air fogging up the windows, and allowed herself to cry, not out of sadness, but relief. "I can still do this," she whispered. "I can still change." Diane found more than just flexibility and strength in that yoga class. She found a sense of control over her life, a confidence she hadn't felt in years. Henry's story was different, yet the lesson was the same. Henry had worked his whole life with his hands, repairing cars and solving problems with grit and determination. Retirement should have been a relief, but instead, it left him with a nagging sense of purposelessness. His back ached, his knees protested every movement, and he often joked that he felt like an old car in desperate need of a tune-up. One day, his granddaughter walked in holding a pair of tiny orange dumbbells. "Grandpa," she said, her eyes shining with excitement, "let's get strong together." She handed him the weights and giggled as he playfully groaned about how heavy they were. That afternoon, they sat together on the couch, and Henry followed her lead as she showed him simple exercises she'd learned in school. At first, he felt silly. The weights were so light they felt like toys, and his stiff joints made every movement feel awkward. But he kept at it, encouraged by his granddaughter's laughter and the way she cheered every small effort he made. Slowly, the weights got heavier, and Henry noticed changes he hadn't expected. He stood a little taller, walked with less pain, and even found himself looking forward to their exercise sessions. One afternoon, as he lifted a heavier set of weights, he caught his reflection in the mirror and smiled. It wasn't just his body that felt stronger, his spirit did, too. The simple act of taking those first steps reminded him that he wasn't done living. He had more to give, more to experience, and more to enjoy. Then there's Linda, whose health journey took her outdoors. Linda had always loved gardening, but in recent years, her knees made it harder to kneel, and her hands grew stiff from arthritis. Her once vibrant flower beds became overgrown, a shadow of the sanctuary they used to be. But Linda wasn't ready to give up on something that brought her so much joy. One spring, she decided to try container gardening, smaller pots and raised beds that didn't require bending down. She spent mornings sitting on her patio, her hands coated in the rich, earthy smell of potting soil. She planted herbs, bright marigolds, and cherry tomatoes that gleamed like little jewels in the sunlight. As the weeks went by, Linda rediscovered the joy of tending to something with patience and care. She found peace in the rhythmic act of watering her plants, listening to the gentle splash of water hitting the leaves. The bright pops of color and the scent of fresh basil brought her happiness she hadn't felt in years. "It's not just a garden," she often said. "It's my little piece of heaven." These stories aren't just about physical health. They're about reclaiming agency, finding purpose, and nurturing joy in unexpected places. Each of these retirees started small, one yoga class, one pair of weights, one garden pot. But those small steps led to transformative changes. The truth is, your health doesn't have to be perfect to make a difference. It's about progress, not perfection. It's about choosing to care for yourself in ways that honor where you are right now. Imagine the freedom of waking up with energy to enjoy the day ahead. Imagine the pride of building strength, even if it's just enough to keep up with your grandkids or walk through your favorite park without discomfort. Imagine rediscovering the joy in life's simplest pleasures. These small choices, done consistently, are the foundation of a happy retirement. Because when you take care of your health, you're not just adding years to your life, you're adding life to your years. And while physical health is vital, it's just one piece of the puzzle. In the next section, we'll explore the habits that nurture your emotional well-being, strengthen your relationships, and help you find joy and connection. Because true happiness isn't just about what you do for yourself. It's about how you share that joy with others. Let's dive in. Retirement is often described as a time of freedom, a chance to step away from the busyness of life and embrace a slower, more intentional rhythm. But with that freedom comes a quiet question. What now? For many, the answer lies not in what we do, but in who we share our lives with. Connection, in all its forms, is the heartbeat of happiness. Margaret had always been the center of every gathering. Her laugh was contagious, her stories captivating, and her presence comforting. Yet, when she retired, something unexpected happened. The steady stream of colleagues who had once filled her days with conversations and camaraderie disappeared. At home, the silence was deafening. The once bustling house where she had raised her children now echoed with memories, not voices. At first, Margaret didn't mind. She told herself she deserved the quiet after years of balancing work and family. But as the months passed, she began to notice the loneliness creeping in, especially in the evenings. She'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world move on without her, and feel an ache she couldn't quite place. One evening, while sorting through an old box of photos, Margaret found a picture from a friend's wedding decades ago. There she was, younger and surrounded by people who had once been her whole world. She couldn't remember the last time she'd spoken to any of them. The thought lingered in her mind like a challenge. The next morning, she picked up the phone and called an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. Margaret, her friend's voice was incredulous. "I thought you'd forgotten about me." The warmth of that conversation stayed with Margaret for days, and it wasn't long before she reached out to others. Coffee dates turned into monthly lunches, and soon her calendar began to fill with plans that brought her joy. Margaret also joined a local book club. At first, she was hesitant, worried she wouldn't fit in, but the group welcomed her with open arms, And it wasn't long before she was laughing over plot twists and sharing stories of her own. The club became more than just a place to discuss books. It was a lifeline, a reminder that her voice still mattered. As Margaret rebuilt her social circle, something inside her shifted. The quiet ache she'd felt began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of belonging. "It's amazing," she often said, "how a single conversation can brighten your whole week." While Margaret found connection by looking back, James discovered it by moving forward. As a truck driver, James had spent his life on the road, always moving, always working. Retirement brought him home, but it also left him feeling untethered. His family was spread out across the country, and the relationships he'd once cherished felt distant, like fading postcards from another time. One summer afternoon, James sat on his porch, sipping sweet tea and watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes. Their laughter carried on the breeze, mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass. He couldn't help but smile, remembering the days when his own children had filled the yard with their games. That evening, he noticed one of the bikes leaning against a tree, its chain rusted and its tires flat. The next day, James knocked on his neighbor's door. "I can fix that for you," he offered, holding up his toolbox. The boy's eyes lit up, and within hours, James was back on his porch, teaching him how to replace a chain and inflate tires. Word spread quickly. Soon, kids were showing up regularly, their bikes in tow, eager to hear James's stories while he worked. He'd tell them about the places he'd seen, mountains that touched the sky, highways that stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. Their wide-eyed curiosity brought a spark back into his days. Inspired by these moments, James reached out to his grandchildren, starting with a letter. "Did I ever tell you about the time I drove through a snowstorm in Wyoming?" he wrote, weaving his memories into tales that made them laugh and ask for more. Weekly letters turned into video calls, and before long, James's once distant relationships grew into something vibrant and alive. James often reflected on how those small acts of connection, fixing a bike, sharing a story, had transformed his life. "I thought I was just passing the time," he said, "but I was really finding my way back to what matters." For Clara, connection came in the form of rediscovery. After years of caring for her husband during his battle with Alzheimer's, Clara was left with an overwhelming emptiness when he passed. The role that had defined her for so long was gone, and she wasn't sure who she was without it. One morning, while tidying the house, she stumbled upon an old sketchpad buried in a closet. Its pages were filled with drawings from a time when her days were colored with creativity. Clara hesitated, then picked up a pencil. At first, the lines felt awkward, her hand unsteady. But as the hours passed, the familiar rhythm of shading and sketching returned. Art became Clara's sanctuary. She joined a local art group, where she found kindred spirits who understood the joy of creating. They shared techniques, encouraged one another, and marveled at the beauty they brought into the world. For Clara, it wasn't just about the art. It was about the connection it fostered, the way it reminded her of her own resilience and strength. Through her sketches, Clara found a way to process her grief and rediscover herself. "Art gave me a voice," she said, "and in finding that voice, I found myself again." Each of these stories shows that connection doesn't have to be grand or complicated. It can start with a phone call, a simple gesture, or even a forgotten passion. What matters is the intention, the willingness to reach out, to share, to be vulnerable. Imagine the joy of rekindling an old friendship, the warmth of hearing a loved one's laughter, or the pride of creating something meaningful. These moments are the threads that weave a life of fulfillment, especially in retirement. As we move forward, let's explore another dimension of happiness, finding purpose and staying curious about the world around us. Because connection is just the beginning. Curiosity and creativity take us even further. Let's uncover how, together, retirement can feel like standing at the edge of a vast, open field. The structure and demands of daily life are gone, leaving you with the freedom to choose your path. But with that freedom often comes uncertainty. How do you fill your days with meaning? How do you keep that spark alive? The answer lies in rediscovering your passions, embracing curiosity, and finding purpose in the things that make you feel most alive. Bill had always been a fixer. As a boy, he spent hours in his father's garage, tinkering with old radios and clocks, curious about how they worked. That curiosity carried him through a long career as an engineer. But when Bill retired, the tools that had once been an extension of his hands were left to gather dust in the corner of his garage. At first, Bill welcomed the quiet. He'd wake up late, drink his coffee while reading the news, and settle into a routine of TV shows and crossword puzzles. But over time, he began to feel restless, like a car idling in neutral. Something was missing, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. One rainy afternoon, while helping his wife clean out the attic, Bill stumbled upon a box of his childhood things. Inside was a rusted, broken wind-up car he hadn't thought about in decades. As he turned it over in his hands, the memories came rushing back. Long afternoons spent on the floor, marveling at the gears and springs. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: excitement. That evening, Bill dusted off his old toolbox and cleared a space in the garage. It wasn't easy. His hands were stiffer now, his eyes not as sharp. But as he worked on that little car, he felt a sense of focus and purpose that had been missing from his life. When the car's wheels finally spun again, Bill grinned like a kid, the sound of the gears a small triumph. Word of his tinkering spread. Neighbors began dropping by with broken appliances and gadgets, and Bill happily took on the challenge. His garage transformed into a lively workshop, filled with the hum of conversation and the clink of tools. Fixing things wasn't just about solving mechanical problems. It became a way to reconnect with others, to share stories, and to feel useful again. Bill often reflected on how that tiny wind-up car had brought him back to himself. It's funny, he'd say, how fixing something small can fix something big inside you. Rachel's path to purpose started with a chance conversation. A retired teacher, she loved her career but found herself adrift in the quiet of her empty home. One morning at her favorite coffee shop, she overheard a group of young mothers lamenting how hard it was to find good, affordable tutors. The teacher in Rachel couldn't resist. "Excuse me," she said, leaning over with a warm smile. "If you're looking for help, I'd be happy to tutor your kids, for free." The mothers were thrilled, and before Rachel knew it, her afternoons were filled with eager students sitting around her dining table. She started with simple lessons, spelling words, multiplication tables, but it wasn't just the kids who lit up. Rachel found herself energized, her passion for teaching reignited. One evening, after a particularly rewarding session, a young boy handed her a crumpled piece of paper. On it was a stick figure drawing labeled Miss Rachel, the best teacher. Tears pricked her eyes as she hugged him, overwhelmed by how much she had missed this connection. Through those lessons, Rachel found more than just a way to pass the time. She found purpose in seeing her students grow, in their smiles and their triumphs. Retirement, she often said, didn't end my teaching journey. It gave me the chance to teach from the heart. For Helen, purpose came in colors she hadn't seen in years. As a single mother, her days had been consumed by work and raising her kids. Painting had always been her dream, but life never seemed to leave room for it. That dream was tucked away, like the blank canvases gathering dust in her closet. On her 70th birthday, Helen's daughter handed her a brightly wrapped package. Inside was a set of paints and brushes, along with a simple note. "It's time to make your masterpiece." At first, Helen hesitated. She stared at the blank canvas for days, afraid of doing it wrong. Finally, her daughter's words echoed in her mind. "There's no right or wrong." With that, she dipped her brush into a vibrant shade of blue and made the first stroke. Each evening, Helen lost herself in the world of colors and textures. Her paintings weren't perfect, but they were hers. The act of painting became a form of meditation, a way to express emotions she hadn't realized she was carrying. Eventually, Helen joined an online community of amateur artists. She shared her work, received encouragement, and found inspiration in the creations of others. Painting didn't just fill her time, it filled her soul. For so many years, she said, I was a caregiver, a provider. Now, I'm finally an artist. And then there was Tom, a former journalist. Tom spent his retirement mornings sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. He loved staying informed, but as the years passed, he felt frustrated by the issues he saw in his community. Underfunded schools, struggling local businesses, and neglected parks. One day, he decided to attend a city council meeting. What began as curiosity quickly turned into action. Tom started volunteering for local initiatives, from organizing park cleanups to advocating for school funding. He became a familiar face at community events, known for his thoughtful insights and tireless dedication. One afternoon, after helping to organize a food drive, a young volunteer approached him. Mr. Tom, she said, you're the reason I started volunteering. You make me believe we can actually make a difference. Tom smiled, his heart swelling with pride. He realized that his purpose wasn't just in the work itself. It was in inspiring others to care, to act, to believe in the power of community. These stories show that purpose can take many forms. It might be a hobby you've put aside, a skill you can share, or a cause you're passionate about. What matters is the impact it has, not just on others, but on you. Imagine waking up each day with a sense of anticipation, knowing that your time will be spent doing something meaningful. Whether it's painting a canvas, fixing a clock, tutoring a child, or making your community a better place. These pursuits fill your days with joy and your heart with fulfillment. And while purpose gives us direction, there's another essential ingredient to a happy retirement: learning to savor each moment with gratitude and mindfulness. Let's explore how embracing the present can deepen the joy in your life. Retirement is often described as a golden opportunity, a time to finally step away from the rush and embrace life at your own pace. But what makes this chapter truly meaningful isn't found in big, sweeping gestures. It's in the quiet moments, the ones where you feel fully alive, connected, and grateful for the life you've built. Tom still remembers the day he found a new sense of purpose. It started with a simple act: volunteering at a local food drive. The work was straightforward, sorting canned goods and packing boxes. But as the day went on, he felt something shift. When a young girl handed him a hand-drawn card with the words, "Thank you for caring about us," his chest tightened with emotion. He held the card in his hands, tracing the uneven lines of the letters, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Not just for the girl's kind gesture, but for the chance to make even a small difference in someone's life. That moment changed everything for me, Tom said later. It reminded me that purpose doesn't have to be complicated. It's about showing up, giving what you can, and appreciating the chance to help. Tom pinned that card to his fridge, where it stayed for years. Every time he saw it, he felt a renewed sense of gratitude, not just for the work he'd done, but for the reminder that even the smallest actions can ripple outward and create something beautiful. Gratitude is a powerful force. It has the ability to transform the way we see the world, turning ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. Helen discovered this truth every morning in her art studio. She would begin her day by pulling back the curtains, letting the sunlight flood the room, and standing quietly before her easel, with a brush in her hand and colors waiting to come alive. Helen would take a deep breath and whisper, "Thank you for this time, for this space, for the chance to create." That small act of reflection became her anchor, a way to ground herself in the present and approach her art with a sense of wonder. Helen often described how her gratitude gave her work new depth. Painting wasn't just about creating something beautiful. It was about expressing a deep appreciation for the life she had, for the freedom to explore her passions, and for the simple joy of watching colors blend and dance on the canvas. Every brushstroke feels like a celebration, she said, of this moment, of this day, of everything I've been given Rachel's gratitude came in the form of a nightly ritual. After a long day of tutoring, she would sit down with a simple notebook and write 3 things she was thankful for. Sometimes they were big, a student's heartfelt thank you or a breakthrough moment in a lesson. Other times, they were small, a warm cup of tea, the sound of rain tapping against the window, the scent of fresh cookies she'd baked that afternoon. At first, Rachel saw it as just another task, something to fill her time. But over the weeks, she noticed a subtle shift. Instead of focusing on what she'd lost in retirement, she began to see all that she'd gained, moments of peace, deeper connections, and the freedom to pursue what truly mattered to her. It's amazing how much changes when you take the time to notice, Rachel said. Gratitude isn't just something you feel. It's something you practice, something you nurture. And the more you do, the more you realize just how much there is to be grateful for. Linda, too, found mindfulness in her daily walks. Each morning, she would lace up her sneakers and step outside, greeted by the cool morning air and the soft glow of the rising sun. Her path wound through a quiet park, where birds sang from the treetops and the scent of fresh grass lingered in the breeze. For Linda, those walks weren't just about exercise. They were a way to reconnect with the world around her. She'd pause to watch the sunlight filter through the leaves, listen to the rustle of squirrels darting through the underbrush, and feel the earth steady beneath her feet. It's like the world slows down, she said, and in that stillness, you find yourself again. One retiree who found gratitude in a unique way was Henry, a man who had always loved music, but had never learned to play an instrument. At a community event, he stumbled upon a group of retirees playing ukuleles, their laughter and music drawing him in. They invited him to join, and though he hesitated, Henry decided to give it a try. At first, the chords felt awkward and his fingers stumbled over the strings. But the group's encouragement kept him coming back, and soon he was strumming along, finding joy in the simple act of making music. Every week, as they played together, Henry felt a growing sense of connection, not just to the music, but to the people around him. One evening, as the group played You Are My Sunshine, Henry glanced around at the smiling faces and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. I never thought I'd feel this alive again, he said. Music gave me a new way to connect, with others, with myself, and with the joy I thought I'd lost. These stories remind us that gratitude and mindfulness aren't just practices. They're gifts we give ourselves. They invite us to slow down, to notice the beauty in our lives, and to create moments of joy and connection. Imagine beginning each day with a heart full of gratitude. Imagine savoring the present moment, finding peace in the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of the sun, or the laughter of a friend. These moments, small as they may seem, are the building blocks of a life well lived. So, what are you grateful for today? What simple joys can you savor in this very moment? Take a walk, call a friend, or start a gratitude journal. Begin wherever you are and let those small acts of mindfulness and appreciation guide you to a deeper sense of fulfillment. The choice is yours, but always remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Every moment holds the potential for growth, connection, and joy. You just have to embrace it. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about the moments that bring you joy, the practices that keep you grounded, or the ways you found purpose in this chapter of your life. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories and insights on living your best life, no matter your age. This is just the beginning. Together, we'll explore more ways to find fulfillment, create connections, and celebrate every moment of this incredible journey. Until next time, take care and keep writing your story.